Chris of Creations by Chris. I'm so excited to show you what I've created. I have promised you how to make your own shoes at home. And this is one pair that I've made already. And now I'm going to show you step by step how you can make your own shoes at home. I've made pumps, heels, and boots. In this video, I'll be taking you step by step as to how you can make your own shoes in your own home. Hi, this is Chris of Creations by Chris, and I said in the earlier video I was going to show you how to make a pair of women's shoes. And what I've done so far is I set out all the materials that you're going to need for this project. Now what I'm going to do is go through piece by piece and explain to you exactly what we're going to be using and what we'll be using it for. This is the style shoe I'll be making. I'll be making a shoe with the heel is out, and then of course they'll have straps around the ankle from the base of the shoe. We're going to be using our fusible interfacing, and the reason why we're using this is because the fabric we're going to be using for the upper part of the shoe is a bit thin, and we want to make sure that it remains stable. And this is the fabric we're going to be using for the upper portion of the shoe. And you notice how you can kind of see my fingers through this because it's a somewhat of a lightweight fabric. Then we're going to be using this piece of cardboard here. And we're going to be using these foam insoles, and this is just to make the shoe comfortable. And these are the heels that we're going to be using for this particular style shoe. It's about 2.5 inches to heel, and they've already have been the fabric and everything been removed from them, because what I do is I'll take a pair of old shoes and I'll reuse those and make the shoe over from the sole up again. And this is the portion of the shoe that we normally use for the arch support, and it has a little hole here on this end and on this end as well that's going to be screwed into the heel. And I've already cut out a pattern of the lower portion of the shoe. This is the sole for the leather portion that we're going to be using. The ribbon we're going to be using to go around the strap, or use as a strap around the ankle. This is the leather that you can purchase from Tandy Leather. It's about 5 to 7 ounces of thickness that we're going to be cutting out for the sole of the shoe. This is called a safety beveler, and what it does, it thins out the leather for the sole. So when you attach it on the shoe, screwdriver, hammer, and this will help us to put the nails or a welt in the shoe. A pair of leather scissors and the rubber cement glue, and this is going to adhere the sole onto the shoe. And we're going to lose a couple of small nails around the edges of the shoe just to make sure it stays sturdy. This fabric here is called buckram. When you wet it, it becomes kind of tacky and sticky, and whatever foam that you lay it across, it'll take on that shape. And muslin we'll be using also, and I've already cut out the pattern for the style and design of shoe I want. And these are the actual lasts, is what they're called, or you can call them, this is the impression of the shoe, inner part of the shoe for my Pacific size shoe. And when you make your own shoes, you'll have to do a plaster last yourself, and I'll show you exactly what that involves. Okay, I'm sorry, this is called a plaster last or impression of your foot or the inside of the shoe that you decide to use to make your impression. And usually you want to find a pair of shoes that are old shoes that you're going to throw away, and you can use that to put the plaster of Paris inside the shoe to actually create your own mold for your foot. And this is plaster of Paris, and what this is used for is to make a plaster for your foot, because you're going to be doing is taking this plaster impression of your foot, and you'll be wrapping your fabric around this so that you can get a mold of your foot which is going to be actually the part that you're going to be using for the actual shoe. Now the first thing we did is we traced out the soles on the shoe onto the rough side of the leather. You see that here? Now we've laid out the upper part of the shoe, and now we're cutting out the layer of the muslin fabric for it. Okay, here we have our buckram, and what we've done is that we've sewn the buckram onto the second set or the second layer of buckram here, and we've already shaped our pattern. Then here we have a layer of muslin that we've cut out already, and that's layered on top of the actual outer fabric that we'll be using, which is laid face down on top of the fabric that will be used for the lining. And we're going to lay all three of these pieces on top of one another. As you can see here, and we're going to layer that on top of the muslin, and we're going to stitch all four of these pieces. Okay, so here are our pattern pieces. We have the 2-layer of buckram, we have the shorter portion of the buckram up top, then we have the longer portion of the buckram, then we have the muslin, then we have the outer fabric, and notice that it's on the wrong side, placed against the lining fabric. So that makes 4 layers. And we've already sewn this portion of the buckram up top here. And then we're going to sew it around the area here. Then we're going to sew it one last time around this area here. Okay, so far what we've done is we've taken the shorter portion of the buckram, that's this piece on top here, and we've stitched it on the longer part of the buckram, and we only stitched it at this point where the circle is, and then we stopped. We left a little bit of space here because now we're going to take these 2 pieces of the buckram and we're going to stitch it onto our muslin fabric. So we're going to layer it on top like this, and then we're going to stitch it around, doing a half circle like we did before the buckram onto the muslin. Okay, so now we'll be stitching it around the lower portion onto the circle around to the edge. Here we go. We stitched it from one edge all the way around to the other edge, and we're going to be placing this portion onto the wrong side of the fabric, which is here, layered it on top of the lining also. So now instead of having 3 pieces, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. And once again, we're going to be stitching this edge around the edge all the way around to the opposite edge, just like we did before. So here we've cut out all the excess fabric, and notice how many layers we have again. The short buckram, and this is layered on a cross grain. Then we have the longer piece of buckram that's on the straight grain of the fabric. We have the muslin. We have the fabric, which is going to be the outer fabric, and all I did with this fabric, because it was a little bit sheer, I just lined it with some fusible interfacing. And this is actually just a piece of felt fabric, and this is going to be used for the lining. So those are all your layers. Now the last step we're going to do is where we're going to turn this inside out, because we want this to be your top layer. This is going to be your lining. It's going to be flipped inside out. And this is the softer piece of fabric that's going to actually be against your foot. And what we're going to do here, once we turn it in that side out like so, we're going to go back inside. And we're just going to stitch this all down. And then all of this is going to be rolled forward. And we're going to damp this a little bit so that we can lay it across our mold. Now at this point, we've already stitched everything down. Now all we need to do is to turn it inside out. We're taking the the outer fabric, and we're going to turn it inside out like that. This will be the back of the shoe, or the upper part of the shoe portion, the back. And that's going to be the upper portion of the shoe, the front. And remember, this is going to be a slide-on shoe where there's no heel fabric, but it will have a heel on it, and it has straps on it as well. So at this point, we're finished with all the sewing by machine, and now we're going to be wetting the fabric a little bit with a spray bottle with water, and we're going to be laying it over the last. Now at this point, all I'm doing here is cutting around the edges, and I'm cutting out the excess fabric that's here. Now, as I said before, what has been done here is that once we sewed all the pieces together, we're going to take the outer fabric here, and that's the inside fabric or the lining. This is the softer portion that's going to be against your foot. We went back and we stitched it again inside here, completely around, separating the back piece. So we've only stitched these layers and not this layer. And the reason why we did this, so that when we flip it inside out like this here, everything lays down nice and flat. So this is the left and this is the right piece here. And this is the portion that's going to lay on the upper part of the plaster or the last, which is a portion for your feet. So far all the sewing on the sewing machine is completed. And as I said before, what we're going to do, we're going to spray this with a little water, because what it's going to do with the back buckram, it's going to make it more pliable. And it's going to be a little tacky or a little sticky. And these are the plaster molds of the last, or they're called last. And this is going to be placed on top, like so. And what we're going to be doing is we're doing a cross stitch across onto this mold. And we're going to let it set overnight. We're going to let it dry. Then I'll show you what it looks like once it's all dry. Now at this point, you're going to need just a regular spray bottle with water, fabric stiffener, because this is going to be placed on the toe between the two layers of buckram. Cut out any square piece of plastic paper. You can use from the package, any type of packaging, even the stocking packaging, the plastic. And these are the plaster last shoes that I showed you earlier, or molds. And what I did is I sprayed the shoes just a little bit mainly the inside layers, because this buckram inside, once it's wet, it's going to mold over the shoe. And I just laid it over the plaster mold. And I just took a regular needle with thread, and then I just stitched it across, hand stitched it across. And we're going to be stitching this from the top all the way in the bottom to the bottom, or midways. I like to start in the center, because then I can see with my placement how the upper fabric is going to lay across my plaster mold. And I can get an eye a little bit better as to the shaping of it and how it's going to lay. And one thing, when you're working with stripes, you want to make sure that you lay this onto your plaster mold. The stripes are straight, because you don't want them crooked, unless you're planning to have the pattern that way, but it's up to you. So far this is what I've done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish stitching the toe area all the way down to the base area here. And feel free to trim it, as long as you know you have enough overhang. And you can trim it a little bit as you go along, or after you finish. It's up to you. Now, between the two layers of the buckram, I've partially sewn, of course, the upper part of the portion of the shoe onto the last, and I've just stitched it across here. Don't worry about your stitches being perfect, because these are going to come out later. These are there only for the purpose of holding the upper portion of the shoe onto the last, so that it becomes molded. We dampened it a little bit already. Only the buckram is we dampened with the water. Now I'm putting on the fabric stiffener, and I'm using my finger, because this fabric stiffener is a little watery. But what I'm doing is putting it basically between the two layers, more so, of the buckram. I got it nice and damp here. And I'm rolling back the upper fabric and the muslin. I'm between the two sections of the buckram, and I'm using my fingers to put it on. Because what I'm going to do at this point now, I'm just going to wipe off my finger. It's going to take a small piece of the plastic paper, and I'm going to lay it between the two layers of the buckram, and they're going to pull everything back in place, like so. I'm going to sew right through the plastic paper here and stitch it all the way up on the toe area. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's completed. And the reason why we put this fabric stiffener, we're using this, is because that way it'll make the toe more sturdy or more stiff. This is the end of part 1, but make sure you return so that you can see the follower, part 2.